So I want to talk this morning about potential. And when I prepared this talk for the ladies in PNG, it was about personal potential. But I think there's a message in here for personal and church potential. So the potential of a church is also hidden in this message. So it starts in 2 Kings, chapter 4, verses 1 to 7. And I'll read it to you. A wife of a man from the company of prophets cried out to Elisha, "Your servant, my husband, is dead, and you know that he revered the Lord. But now his creditor is coming to take my 2 boys and his slaves." Elisha replied to her, "How can I help you? Tell me, what do you have in your house?" That's a very important question, and I thought a strange question for Elisha to ask. How can I help you? Elisha's the miracle man, right? And instead he says, what do you have in your house? "Your servant has nothing here at all," she said, "except for a small jar of olive oil." And Elisha said, "Go around and ask all your neighbors for empty jars. Don't ask for just a few. Then go inside and shut the door behind you and your sons. Pour the oil into all the jars, and as each is filled, put it to one side." So she left him and shut the door behind her sons. They brought the jars to her, and she kept pouring. When all the jars were full, she said to her son, "Bring me another one." But he replied, "There's not a jar left." Then the oil stopped flowing. She went and told the man of God, and he said, "Go, sell the oil and pay your debts. You and your sons can live on what is left." As we break that story down, we're looking at, as I mentioned before, Elisha, and the woman cries out to him. And there are many people that will cry out to us as well as churches for help. And his answer was, "How can I help you? Tell me, what do you have?" And this is about empowering people. We often will expect others to be responsible for empowering us. And that may be in our faith walk, it may be in our life, and we will blame others for our failure. But God is asking, what do you have? Because we know that even faith as small as a mustard seed will produce a mountain. One of the enemy's most effective strategies is to get us to focus on what we don't have, what we used to have, or what someone else has that we wish we had. He does this to keep us from looking in our own house, from looking at ourselves and asking, "God, what can you do through what I have?" Like I said, we want other people to be responsible for mission. We want other people to be responsible for our faith. But we need to look within and ask God the question, what can you do with what I have? Her answer was, "I have nothing." How many times have you thought that of yourself? I have nothing to give. I'm not equipped. I need to go and do a course, do uni. I'm one of those people. "Your servant has nothing here at all," she said, "except a small jar of olive oil." The widow hadn't yet realized that all God needed was what she had. All God needs is what we have. All God needs is for us to be willing to submit what we have. To put it very simply, everyone has something that can be used to contribute to the well-being of our own lives and of our communities. God has given each of us something. No one is exempt from that. We are all planted with the seed of something. What do you have? I know this because we are all created by God, and He has planted that special something in each of us with the purpose of bringing Him glory through how that will be used. So the widow's oil is a story that reveals the mystery of potential. I believe we live in a day that's very much like Elisha's day. I think God is looking to use men and women who think that they have nothing to give, particularly those people, to help turn the hearts of today's people back to God. He's not really looking for those with great abilities. How will He be glorified through that? It's through the least of us that God's glory will truly shine. He's simply looking for people to be available to him. We don't need to wait to have the right amount of money. We don't need to wait for someone to be qualified. We need to pursue God and make ourselves available for him to use us, to be part of God's purpose so that his glory will be revealed. His glory is not going to be revealed through the strong, through the trained, through the cashed up, through the intelligent. That can be seen as their own. His glory will be revealed through that last jar of oil, the one who thought they had nothing. God's blessing is not dependent on our worthiness. Perfection is not the price of admission to God's kingdom. Imperfection never stopped God from blessing anybody. The only thing blocking the blessing is our own unbelief. So here's the secret I'm going to let you in on. God's glory is made manifest through our limitation. Think about it. If we could really do everything, how's God revealed through that? It's very hard for us to take on the giants when we see ourselves as grasshoppers. But don't shut the gate to God's blessing because you feel unworthy or limited. Potential is a seed, as I said, a seed sown into us, and we can really apply that concept of the story of a seed, I suppose you could call it, in potential. And I have this saying, until you sow it, you won't know it. When you're holding it in your hand, you're never going to know the potential of that seed. You know, you might think what it might do for you, but while it's in your hand, it's not doing nothing. In 1 Kings, Elijah is ploughing a field. Elijah's not taking selfies of himself next to a plough about to plough a field. And he's not thinking about ploughing, he's not studying ploughing, and he's not talking about it in Greek. He's ploughing the field. And so that seed could be planted. A lot of times we think our ground is not good enough, and so we avoid planting our seed. We think we're not worthy to be used. We've got a history. God can't use us. But until you plant that seed, you will never know what that seed will produce. So much of us is covered up by our dirt, by our shame, by our mistakes. But the thing about dirt is that's where seed grows. That's where our potential will grow. It goes in to multiply. People might write you off, but God is going to use your pain to release your potential. The seed of potential is in our hand, and you can keep it in your hand, but it will never do anything for you, and it'll certainly never do anything for God's kingdom. That seed has to be put into soil, and it has to be released from your hand. And to release our potential, we have to open our hand. And the releasing is a part, I think, that so much of us get stuck in. We might be afraid to release our potential. We might be holding on to things that we're afraid if we open our hand up to loving someone, to forgiving someone, to letting someone into our life, that we will be hurt again. And so we keep our hand closed and we never release that seed of potential. Is there a situation in your life that you need to release to God, to let the oil flow, to let it grow, to let it grow? Potential is not about producing something that God didn't put inside you. Like I said, we've all been given something unique. But sometimes we see someone else's potential and we try to be like them. And we create that unusual syndrome of an apple trying to be an orange and a lemon trying to be a pear. It's about releasing your potential and letting your uniqueness come through that. Don't try to be like someone else. God made you specifically to be you. Let go of how you think things are supposed to be. We look at other people and we measure our lives against them. And if it's not tracking the same way, we think we've failed. We put the ridiculous expectations on ourselves, and we also put ridiculous expectations on the people around us. We expect them to measure up to what we think they need to be accepted. And in doing that, we're only stifling their own potential. We need to let go of disappointment. We need to let go and release it so that many seeds, including our own, can be sown. Sow your seed even when you're disappointed. This is the great thing about seeds. Seeds don't know when the farmer's in a bad mood. He just chucks them in the ground. They still go in. So sow your seed even when you're disappointed, even when you're angry, even when it makes no sense to sow it. Still sow it. Release it to God, and He will reveal its potential. See, it's not our job, it's His. Trust in God, and you will see what He will do through your faith, even though faith is small as a mustard seed. And here comes the next step in this seed growing process, perhaps another hard one. So you can see it's not easy to release, but the next one I think is even harder for some of us, and that's we have to remain and we have to wait. And we don't know for how long. It's called, my favourite place and I've mentioned it when I've spoken before, is the waiting place. It's mentioned in Dr. Seuss's book, Oh, the Places We Will Go. There's the waiting place. Moses waited 40 years. How can the seed grow if we keep uprooting it to check it? Every time it gets uncomfortable, we pull it up and put it somewhere else. Are we impatient with our seeds? The soil is also important. It's an important part of the growth of the seed, the power of your environment. What is around the seed determines what is within the seed will come out. Cover your seed with faith. Surround yourself with people of faith. If your seed is not growing, what are you surrounding it with? In your mind? Are you talking about faith, but in your mind, are you denying it? Are you holding on to things that are going to inhibit the growth? In your time, how are you spending your time that's going to nurture your seed of potential? In your support network, who are the people you rely on, that you turn to when you need encouragement because the waiting is getting difficult? The importance of positive thinking, positive practices, and positive people around you to nourish your seed cannot be understated. I liken the story of the widow and the oil and the sons, and God says, get the jars and go into your house and shut the door. And I heard someone saying that the reason the door is shut is to stop all the negative Nellies having their say. When they're trying to do the impossible with God, someone would be saying, that's ridiculous. How could that happen? That's ridiculous that you're collecting all those jars of oil and you've just got that tiny jar on yourself. Sometimes we try to achieve big things for God and we get so practical about it and we bang it on the head and say, that's ridiculous. See, there is nothing that God cannot do. He's just asking us to show up with our seed of potential, plant it, nurture it, nourish it, and trust Him. But plant your seed. Don't plant your seed trying to be an apple when you really are a pear. In your heart, He has planted your desires, and He will use those, and He'll use your gifts for His good in His kingdom. Stay in faith, remain on the vine so that you can bear fruit. Don't keep digging up your seed and putting it in another place because it might do better over there. Learn to wait. Peter fished all night and he caught nothing. When Jesus commanded, he cast his net on the other side and pulled in more fish than he could handle. He obeyed and he kept fishing even when it seemed ridiculous. He didn't give up. 1 John chapter 3 verse 2 says, we are God's children now. Now. Not tomorrow, not when we get better, not when we get better in our faith, not when we get stronger in our faith. We are actually all God's children right now in this moment. And what will be has not yet appeared. But it will be revealed if you remain. So staying and remaining is such an important part of our spiritual journey. When we have planted a seed, when we have determined that we want to love more, that we want to forgive more, and people are still turning on us, and people are still condemning us and criticizing us and judging us, Jesus says, keep loving. Love them even more. Let your seed wait. That seed of love will change that person's heart eventually. God will work through. But just know what your part is in this. Plant your seed in good soil, nurture it, and wait. You don't know what's in you yet. You don't know what the broken bread of your disappointments and difficulties are going to multiply into, because God is going to use all of those. But you don't know yet, so don't give up. The enemy knows he can't remove anything that God has planted within us. He cannot keep you from sowing, but he can make us quit. I really want you to think about that and understand this. God has given each of us a spark, a light, a seed, call it what you will, to manifest his glory in this broken world. The enemy cannot take that from us. He can cover it with dirt and make us think we're not worthy. He can make us quit, stop hoping, and you will never know what could have been. It's too soon to tell what it's going to be. Don't quit and keep trusting. Oh, good, we've got time. I want to share a story of, I was sharing this talk to the ladies in PNG because I'd been asked to speak to them about rising from poverty. And it's really difficult in a place where things are so difficult to talk about rising from poverty. But I could see that as we come together as a community with the potential that God has given us, there is opportunity to work together, to rise. And I shared with them a story from this lady by the name of Maya Angelou. I don't know if anyone's heard of her. She's a Native American, a Black American. She was born in 1928 in St. Louis, Missouri. And when she was 3 and her brother 4, their parents had a disastrous marriage and it ended. And they were both shipped off to live with their grandmother. So back in 1928, if I'm right, America was still quite hostile towards the Negroes, had a negative outlook towards the Negroes. And they put these parents put their 2 children, a 3- and 4-year-old, on a train by themselves with a cardboard sign around their neck with their grandmother's address on, and popped them away to their grandmother. 4 years later, the father's children took the children from their grandmother, so they were shipped off, lived with their grandmother for 4 years, then removed again without warning, and returned them to their mother's care in St. Louis. At the age of 8, Maya, while living with her mother, was sexually abused and raped by her mother's boyfriend. She then told her brother, too afraid to tell the rest of the family. The man who did this was found guilty and jailed for 1 day. 4 days after his release, he was murdered, and it's suspected that it was done by members of her family. Maya became mute for 5 years following that murder because she believed that her voice had killed that man. She believed because she spoke out, she was responsible for the death of that person. She says, "I thought my voice killed him. I killed that man because I told his name. And then I thought I would never speak again because my voice would kill anyone." It was during the period of silence that Maya developed an extraordinary memory. Her love for books and literature and her ability to listen and observe the world around her became obvious. Shortly after the man's murder, Maya and her brother were sent back to their grandmother. And her teacher there in her grandmother's town helped her to speak again and introduced her to books written by famous authors who would affect her life and career. And we're talking about the seed of potential. This girl has had a disastrous childhood. You talk about the enemy trying to stifle you and stop you. He was hard at work with this young girl. Maya, the girl who was abandoned by her parents, viciously abused, who couldn't speak for 5 years, was also a girl who refused to let her past dictate her future. And I want you to remember what I've just told you about this lady Maya, and I want to tell you what she did with her life. At the age of 16, she became the first black female cab car conductor in San Francisco. She grew up to be an author, poet, historian, songwriter, playwright, dancer, stage and screen producer, director, performer, singer, and civil rights activist. Don't tell me you've got nothing. She was nominated for the National Book Award and the Pulitzer Prize for her work. In 1959, at the request of Dr. Martin Luther King, Maya became the Northern Coordinator for the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. She was a strong Christian woman. Her grandmother had a very strong Christian influence on her. She was appointed by Gerald Ford, then President of the USA, to the Bicentennial Commission, and later by Jimmy Carter, the next President of the USA, to the Commission for the International Woman of the Year. And look at her beginnings. She accepted a lifetime appointment in 1982 as the Reynolds Professor of American Studies at Wake Forest University. She wrote and delivered a poem at the inauguration of President Bill Clinton at his request. In 2000, she received the National Medal of Arts. In 2010, she was awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom by President Barack Obama. Oh, that we could all be women like her. She was the first black woman director in Hollywood. She wrote, produced, directed, and starred in productions of stage, film, and television, and has also written and produced several prize-winning documentaries. Her life is a mission of awakening people to the powerful need for love in this world. She was twice nominated for a Tony Award for acting, and in 2014, she received a Lifetime Achievement Award from the Conference of Minority Transportation Officials as part of the session-build Women Who Move the Nation. Maya was a woman who loved God and had strong faith. Despite everything that she went through as a child, she allowed her potential to be planted, she nurtured it, and she took responsibility for the direction of her life. She could have blamed everyone from her past for lack of opportunity, for lack of confidence, for not being able to speak. But she took responsibility and she let her potential come to full bloom in this world. She has left a legacy that inspires women, including myself, all around the world, to rise above our situations, to realize the potential that God has put inside each and every one of us without exception. And I want to close with just a few lines from one of her poems, I Will Rise. You may write me down in history with your bitter, twisted lies. You may trod me in the very dirt, but still, like dust, I will rise. You may shoot me with your words. You may cut me with your eyes. You may kill me with your hatefulness. But still, like air, I'll rise. Out of the huts of history's shame, I rise. Up from the past that's rooted in pain, I rise. I'm a black ocean leaping and wide. Leaving behind the nights of terror and fear, I rise. Into a daybreak that's wondrously clear, I rise. Bringing the gifts that my ancestors gave, I am the dream and the hope of the slave. I rise, I rise, I rise. You don't know what's in you. You don't know what God has planted in you, so don't judge it too soon. It's too soon to tell. If God is in it, it shall come forth. God is the maker of new life. The bones will have new life, and by his Spirit, you will rise. You don't know how God is going to work in your situation, and it's too soon to quit on something God has put inside of you. Don't give up on your situation, but wait for God's revelation. Thank you. Let us pray. Father God, as we break from this service today, may we carry the reminder in our hearts that you've given each of us, Lord, a unique seed of potential to be realized in this world for your glory. Lord, I pray that we will each plant that seed, have courage to let go and allow that seed to be planted. Have courage to seek our hearts, search our hearts, and see what we are holding on to that is blocking that seed from reaching the soil and growing. May we nurture that soil, Lord, with goodness, with kindness, positive thinking, and may we learn the value in surrounding ourselves with good people and people who encourage us. But more importantly, Lord, may we always remember that nothing can remove that seed that you have given us. We can only give that power away. So, Lord, I pray that each of us will walk with courage and determination to allow your seed to come to its full purpose in our lives for your glory. In Jesus' name, amen.